Scatter plots are the next and final graph to talk about. So when we talk about scatter plots, what makes a scatter plot special? What makes a scatter plot special is that a scatter plot can show relationships or co, I'm sorry, start over again, starting over. Here we go. Scatter plots, 3, 2, 1. Scatter plots are interesting and they're kind of new to a lot of people. They have seen them maybe, but they might have a hard time reading them. So when it comes to a scatter plot, what makes it special? What makes it special is its ability to show a relationship. Also, we can see trend like we can in a line graph. So let's go ahead and get to this and we'll take a look at scatter plots. Okay, let's start right here. This is a nice way to start this. So scatter plots. This is a scatter plot. Okay. And the word scatter, what it means is that it just shows data points all over the place. Now, you're going to see that each one of these dots, it represents an individual. So this is an individual person. And according to this is their exam score based on the number of absences. So each point represents a person or a single data point. Now, when we look at this, I would say, okay, again, do you still see a title? I'd say, yes, I still see the title. This is absences versus exam scores. So this is a great representation of what makes a scatter plot special. It's showing or it's comparing absences and exam scores. Now, as you can tell, for a number of absences, it starts over here at 0. And then as I move to the right, it gets higher, 10. Exam scores. You can see that they start at, well, they have the little break here. You see that little break, which is not showing all the way to 0. But you can just extrapolate the fact that that's the lowest point. So the extremely low point, so it starts low, and then it goes high. Sorry, high. Anyway, HIGH is what I'm trying to get to. There we go. So let me ask you a question, okay? And maybe it'll make it a little easier to understand. If you increase your number of absences, which means I'm not going to school. I'm not going. I'm missing classes. I'm not showing up. So the more absences that I have from school, doesn't it make sense that my test scores would go low or get lower? So if you said, you know what, that makes sense. I mean, if you're not going to class and you're not getting the instruction and you're not practicing, yeah, your exam scores are not going to get higher. They're going to get lower. In fact, it makes sense that it's if you have a lot, the more and more absences you have, the lower and the lower the score would get. Well, that's exactly what's happening with this scatter plot. Now let's go ahead and take a look at this. If you look at this scatter plot and we take a look at it, what it does is it starts off, let's take a look at the number of absences, which means let's take a look here and let's see. I have here, this is a 0 and this is 5. Is I have to say, is that one absence? Is that two? Well, you have to count. Say, well, one, two, three, four, five. Okay, yes, it is. Yes, it is. So again, remember, these graphs aren't going to label everything. You have to kind of look at the context clues that are there and make some decisions. So I have to count and figure out, well, what's that space? Okay, well, let's count. Well, it means that each hash mark represents a day. So, or one absence. So that's one absence. That's two. That's three. That's four. And then there's five. That's six. That's seven. That's eight. That's nine. And there's 10. Okay, so take a look. At one absence, if I look up, I'd say, well, where are your scores at? Now you're going to notice there's two dots there, right? Remember, each dot represents a single individual person. So it means that, hey, a person who has one absence, or if you have one absence, I see that two people had one absence, and this was their score. One score, it looks like, was about a 93, maybe if I had to come up with a number, and the other score was 100, which is perfect. Okay, well, what about the person who made two absences? What did they do? And I look up and I say, let's see. Oh, there's three people here who had two absences. And so, well, what were their scores? Well, looks like this low person made an 83. This one looks to be about a, I don't know, 87. I don't know. You have to kind of guess there a little bit, right? Because it's going somewhere in between here. And then this one is over here. I don't know. Was that 97, 98? I don't know. It's close. So this is what's happening is that, can you tell that as you continue to increase the number of absences, what's happening to the scores? Are the scores increasing? Am I going back to maybe 100? Or are the scores decreasing? If you said, hey, it looks like the more absences you have, the lower your scores tend to get. Doesn't that make sense to you? Like if you just thought about that, doesn't that make sense? The more classes you miss, the worse your score is going to be. It just makes sense, right? So, and that's exactly what this data is showing us. So what we see here is we see a relationship. The increase in the number of absences is showing a decrease in your test scores. And we'd say that is a relationship. So you want to go, well, so based on that information, if I knew that happened to students last year, I'd say, oh, that happened to my students last year. Oh, the persons who missed 10 classes, they made low scores. And the persons who only missed one class, they made really high scores. So if I had to have some advice for the next class that was coming in, I said, hey, you should what? Miss a lot of classes if you want to make a high score, or miss a few classes if you want to make a high score. Hopefully the answer to you is like, well, miss less classes, because the less classes you miss, it just by the results from the previous class, the higher the scores you're going to make. Now, is that the law or the rules? No, but it is showing a trend. There is a relationship here, and I can kind of point to it and say, well, this is my data from last year. So this is kind of what a scatter plot's doing. Again, I can also show trend. This is another word. And remember, trend, the vocabulary says, where are we going? Or where is the data going? Now, what I mean by that is this too. When it goes from something like this, we call this distance up here, we call this high. We say high left, right? Because all my data points are very high on the left side. And as I move to the right side, or way over here, my data points are actually low, right? Because the number is actually coming down, right? The score is going low. We call this, when you see data moving in this direction, we call this a negative relationship. This is a negative relationship. So again, the more absences you make, the lower your score gets. So you have a negative relationship. More scores or more absences equals lower score. So let's look at something else. Let's look at another one. I want to find a nice graph right here. Hold on 1 second. Here's a nice, let me find, oh, here's a nice graph. Here we go. Okay, let's take a look at this scatter plot. Okay. So again, I have some scatter plot. I have multiple data points all over here. And I'd say, okay, let's check out our stuff. Title, do I see my title? Yes, this is the carpenter's earnings. What are my variables? I see time or days, right? Actually, and they're comparing it to earnings or money, right? I'd say here's my low spot. I move to the right. I'm increasing the number of days. Also from the low spot, as I look up, I'm increasing the number of earnings or dollars. Now, look at where the data is going. If I asked you, hey, how is your data moving over time or the number of days, which means as I start at 0 and I start to look at to the right, are my data points getting higher on the graph or lower on the graph? Well, you'd say, well, they seem to be moving higher. So as I move to the right and I look to the right, yes, my data points are actually moving higher and higher and higher, which means the earning number is getting higher and higher and higher. So again, remember, you're comparing the number of days to the amount of earnings that you make. And so let's describe this. This says, hey, so the more days I work, the higher my income is going to be. Yes, yes, that's exactly right. Because as you increase the number of days that you're working, your income is actually increasing. So this is called a positive relationship because the data or my data points are moving from the low left to the high right, which means as I'm looking from 0 and I look towards the right direction, my data points are actually moving higher on the graph. And higher, again, remember, means the earnings. They're moving higher and higher. This is called a positive relationship. The more time I work, the more money I make. And hopefully that statement makes sense to you. Hopefully you see that and you say, yeah, that makes sense. Just like the other one made sense. The more absences you have, the lower your score would be. This one says the more days you work, the more money you make. Yeah, it kind of makes sense, right? Nobody would work if the days was the more days you work, the less money you make. If that was true, nobody would work more than 1 day, right? Because that would mean that the only working 1 day is the highest amount of money you make. If you work 2 days, you're going to make less money. That is so if that was true, nobody would work more than 1 day a week or 1 hour. So this is called a positive relationship. Again, when we go from low left, and again, you're looking at the data that's moving in an upward direction. We call this upward. This is an upward direction when my data moves from low left to high right. This is called downward. Again, upward is positive relationship. Downward is a negative relationship. So this is some vocabulary that you want to include when you talk look at scatter plots. Now, let's go ahead and answer this question. This is a scatter plots. It's a lot of vocabulary. It's a lot of language. We talk a lot when it comes to scatter plots. It might take you a little while and to keep practicing and playing with these, maybe watch other videos and or try some other quizzes and homework. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. But when it comes to scatter plots, there's a lot of vocabulary. So try not to get too overwhelmed. Let's go ahead and take a look, and let's just take a look and answer this question. Okay. So question number 14 says, if a carpenter earned $1,000, what is the best estimate for how many days that person worked? So when you look at this, they're saying, hey, if somebody made this much money, about how many days did they have to work to make $1,000? Well, in order to do that, I have to go up to 1,000 and then start looking to the right and see, do I have a data point, at that mark? And I do. I actually have one right there on the $1,000 mark. And it clearly indicates that that is located at the fourth day. At the fourth day, you're making $1,000. So how many days does it take me to make 1,000? 4. 4 days. Now, one of the things that may come up during a scatterplot question is this. What if instead of what if the question was not $1,000? What if the question was $1,500 or 1,500? Well, that's going to be a different answer because we're not looking at 1,000 anymore. So let's take a look at that example. What if that happened? Okay, so again, we go up to 1,500 and then I look over and I'd say, do I see a data point? Like, uh-oh, Darren, I don't see any data points. There's nothing marked at 1,500. Okay, well, there's something that we do with scatter plots that we don't do with other graphs. And what it's called is we put something, we can draw something in on the chart. We can actually draw something on the chart. And this is called a trend line. On the test, they might even have this word as another word called the line of best fit. So again, what this is this is going to be a line that we draw. On the graph. Now, a lot of times when students start talking like this, students they get a little unsure. They start to feel very insecure about this. But I'm just going to tell you, it just takes practice. Maybe watch some more videos, maybe find some other videos about trend lines or drawing lines of best fit on scatter plots. That way you can get other examples for you to continue to watch this video. It's already a long video, but we could just talk more and more about this, but I want to draw it for you. Okay, a trend line is something we would actually draw on the graph. So somebody gives me this graph and says, hey, Darren, I want you to draw a trend line or a line of best fit. I want you to put one there. So what the point is this. I want to draw a line on the graph. Okay. Now, this line, as you can tell, you'd say, well, Darren, first off, is that a straight line? No, it's not. So it's going to be very hard to draw a straight line. But the point is this. When I draw this line, I'm going to draw it. You want to do one thing. Okay, here's the thing. When you draw this trend line, because you have to draw it, you want half of the dots, half of the data points, right? Half of the data points, you want to be above the line. That's what we call this side of the line. And then half of the data points, you want to be below the line. Now, again, this is not an exact science. So if you're like, Darren, so does that mean I have to count each one of these dots now and then try to draw the line between them? And do I need a protractor? And do I need a compass? And how much tools do I need? No, no, no. It's just a goal. Your goal is try to get half of the data points above the line and half of the data points below. Again, it's not a science. You're just trying to do it so that when you draw this line, you're just doing the best that you can to do that. Okay, again, my line's not straight, but it does look like I have a few points above, a few points below. Now, another thing they're going to ask you about this trend line, okay, is they're also going to show you, they can say, hey, is this a positive trend? Is this positive? Or is my trend line increasing? Do you remember that? Or is my trend line negative and decreasing? Well, because it's going from low left to high right, it's moving high right. Right? It's moving in this direction. I would say, oh, this is a positive or increasing trend. Again, doesn't it make sense? The more time you work, the more money you make. So if I continue past 10 days and just say, well, what about 20 days of work? Well, shouldn't that money be somewhere way up here? Shouldn't my money, according to what I'm doing on my graph, shouldn't it be higher? And the answer is, yeah, of course. The more time you work, the more money you make. So you're going to probably have to look at a couple more videos and look at trend line or line of best fit to get a couple more examples. But for this video, I think we've done a lot and we've done too much already. But if you do want to have more questions and you do want to practice, remember, look up trend line, look up line of best fit, look up practicing drawing those two things. Okay. Good luck with everything.